right. This is not the next chapter after the one I just read. And the reason it is because that one is set in Poland. And there are a bunch of Polish names and Polish rank titles, which Dragon is perfectly happy to accept however I think they're pronounced. But I'm going to be in Poland in about 2 weeks, and I don't want to be over there to be looking at me and going like, oi. So we're going to skip ahead a chapter. And this one, chapter 3, is Cold Mountain, Transylvania County, North Carolina, United States. A remarkably beady pair of blue eyes considered Dave Dvorak across the cheerful kitchen table, dark with distrust as he folded the phone and shoved it into his pocket. It wasn't actually a phone, of course, although it was already obvious that was what people were going to go on calling it, just as they'd called the portable computers company like Apple and Samsung had been selling their customers for years phones, despite how little they remembered the device he remembered hanging on his parents' kitchen wall. Of course, this one went a bit further than iPhones or Galaxies had, although, now that he thought about it, Galaxy might not be all that bad a name for it. While it resembled the flip phones that smartphones had long since made obsolete, the folding unit was actually only the interface for the slim 2-inch by 2-inch wafer-thin sliver of molecular circuitry, unshakably attached to his belt via a nanotech-based sticky surface whose physics would probably have been enough to induce massive migraines even in someone who actually understood the laws of physics. Or someone who understood what humanity had thought were the laws of physics 6 months earlier, anyway. The communications satellites the Shangari had parked in geosynchronous orbits to replace the human satellites they'd exterminated once they realized the internet was more trouble than it was worth and decided to take down all human communication devices, were still there and operating under new management. The phone attached to his belt could reach any other phone anywhere on the planet, or within several light seconds of Earth for that matter, courtesy of that satellite net. According to Chester Gannon, a Lawrence Livermore physicist who'd happened to be visiting relatives in Kernersville when the Shangari arrived, it could also perform somewhere around 2 petaflops worth of calculations in a second. Dvorak was a historian by inclination and a pretty fair gunsmith, but he'd always been a bit fuzzy about the magic that went on inside even merely human computers. So he understood that a petaflop meant a whole big bunch of calculations, and that packing that kind of power into a small portable unit that ran on self-contained power was going to change the world more than iPhones and Galaxies ever had. Beyond that, it was just better magic than he'd had before, and he hoped to hell that autocorrect worked better on it than it had on his iPhone. And the reason you're thinking about that is because you don't want to think about the fact that the love of your life just heard your end of the conversation, Dave, he reflected. Sam and Longbow and Howell are out of their damn minds if they think I'm going to agree to run for the Senate, I believe you said, Shannon Dvorak quoted from memory with devastating accuracy. Oh no, you're not getting me into Washington or Raleigh or wherever the hell else we put the Capitol. And once we get around to rebuilding it, I've got me a cabin up in the hills with a bunker by God, and I'm a-staying in it. She leaned back and folded her arms. Did I get that approximately right? Nobody said anything about the Senate, he said in a hopeful sort of tone, and she raised one eloquent eyebrow with a magnificent snort of disdain. Well, they didn't, he protested. Not one single word. Of course they didn't, she retorted. After all, you might lose an election, Mr. Special Advisor. So of course they decided to do a workaround. But honey, he said reasonably, I can't just sit around up here in the mountains while they're trying to put an entire world back together. You know that. No, I don't know that. She glowered at him. There are a lot of other things you could be doing, including getting your sorry butt well again before you go charging off after the next windmill on your list. Hosea says I'll be fine, and it feels a lot better already, honest. He shifted his left shoulder cautiously, and it really did hurt a lot less than it had a couple of weeks ago, which wasn't to say it still didn't hurt like a son of a bitch if he moved it without thinking about it. On the other hand, for a joint which had been thoroughly shattered, as in reduced to the consistency of fine gravel by a Shangir bullet, it was doing remarkably well. And once the rebuilding process was complete, it should be good as new. Really! Not that Sharon, and he himself, if he was going to be honest about it, hadn't experienced the odd qualm about volunteering as the first test subject for the medical research Dr. James Hosea McMurdo and a dozen or so docs from the Duke University School of Medicine had reprogrammed to work on humans instead of Shangari, Kreptu, Barthoni, or any of a dozen other alien species. The neuroeducators Mircea Basarab, otherwise known as Vlad Dracula, had left in Governor Judson Howell's care were capable of teaching almost anyone with incredible speed. It turned out they couldn't teach quite everyone. About 11% of human brains didn't seem to take to it. But that was still pretty damn good, and the computers aboard the fabrication ships Vlad had left behind contained pretty much the entire technical and scientific database of the galactic hegemony. So, theoretically, any human could learn anything in that database overnight. And McMurdo, who'd happened to be one of the best physicians Howell had available, had been tapped to dig into the medical portion of that database and drag out anything that could possibly help in the face of the appalling wreckage the Shangir invasion had left in its wake. As it turned out, there were quite a few things in that medical portion that could help quite a lot, assuming the human physicians involved got their sums right when they reprogrammed it. The galactic hegemony's practice of medicine was just a bit more advanced than Earth's had been, including a body of knowledge literally tens of thousands of years deep, which had been distilled down into techniques and custom-tailored nanotech that could be programmed to work with scores of different physiologies, as long as the people responsible for the programming knew what they were doing. That was where the theoretical bit about the neural educator learning process came into play. There was a difference between simply acquiring data and learning to use it as knowledge. And it wasn't too surprising Sharon had nursed a few reservations about using her one and only husband, not to mention the father of her 3 children, as a test subject. So far, though, it seemed to be working as advertised, and he hadn't turned green or started growing antennae at all. Yet, at least. It may, and I stress may, be fine eventually, she said now. It isn't yet, though, and the kids need you right here being part of the stability in their lives. He sighed and sat back in his own chair, looking across the table at her in the cheerful, sunny kitchen of the cabin where they and their family had ridden out apocalypse and, beyond all expectation, survived it. And he knew she had a point. On the other hand, so did Howell. "Honey, you're right," he said quietly, and watched her eyes widen at his admission. "But there are millions, probably billions of other kids out there in the holy howling hell of a mess the frigging puppies left in their wake. And they need somebody to pull them out of it. I can't be out with the contact teams like Longbow or Pieter or even Rob and Sam. Not with this." He tapped the sling supporting his left arm with his functional hand. "And nobody's asking me to be out there either. But we've got to build something better on the ruins, and we've got to build it fast. And Howell needs all the help he can get doing that." "You don't have to kill yourself." Sharon's tone was almost pleading. "It's not like you're the only person he could ask. Hell, Dave, most of the North Carolina University system survived. You're telling me that with all that available, you're the one guy he needs? I mean, I love you, and I think you're pretty darn smart, but really? And he needs you like right now? Can't even wait the couple of months Hosea it will take to finish fixing your shoulder?" Her fury was obvious to him, and so were the real reasons for it. "There's a lot of other guys available to him," he said, "and frankly, I think a lot of them are a lot smarter than me. But he trusts me. Maybe just as importantly, Pieter and Longbow and Vlad trust me. It's likely to take a while for them to start trusting anyone else, as much as they already trust me." "So what?" She glared at him. The one thing we've got is time, Dave. Given how long it takes to get from star to star, it'll be centuries before anybody else from the hegemony, her lips twisted with disgust as she used the term, gets here to see what the Shangari did to us, or to do anything else to us for that matter. It'll probably be centuries, he corrected gently. I'll even give you that we almost certainly have centuries, but we can't guarantee that. Besides, the hegemony's not who I'm worried about. Not right now, anyway. Her blue eyes narrowed and she cocked her head with a questioning expression he'd learned to recognize over the years. Right this minute, Howell has a monopoly on the tech base Vlad left behind, and I trust him, he said. Matter of fact, he's one of the very few people I would trust with that kind of lever. And with Longbow and Pieter and the other vampires looking over his shoulder, I doubt he's likely to succumb to any latent delusions of godhood. But there's an entire planet out there, and most of it, especially the developed most of it, has been shot to hell. Best estimate right now, we're down to maybe a quarter of the planetary population we had last time this year. Think about that. I know you understand, we all understand what that means in human terms, in terms of dead parents and children and learning to live with all the holes it's torn in our lives. But it also means virtually every government in the world's been destroyed, or at least mortally wounded and left for dead. Now that the teams are starting to spread out, I'm beginning to really realize, what an unbelievable job Howell did of maintaining order and stability here in North Carolina, even if he did have to pretend to collaborate with the puppies to pull it off. Most of the rest of the world wasn't that lucky, honey.